Dystopian or anti-utopian literature has been one of the more popular and influential forms of fiction to come out in the last 100 years or so. The elements of dystopian fiction go back much further than that, of course. You can see elements of dystopia in Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, or all the way back to Aristophanes' Cloud Cuckoo Land. But the growth of the superstate in the 20th century also led to a growth in literary critiques of those kind of superstates and the political ideologies that motivate them, aka the anti-utopian or dystopian novels. What dystopia really is a critique of utopian thinking, of the kind of thinking that individuals or groups go through, where they think if they, the individual or the group, just imposes their view of what a perfect society would be on society, then everybody in society will be happy. They can create a perfect society by imposing their view of perfection on everybody else. So what are the elements of dystopia as given this way? Well, first is that utopian society, supposedly utopian. They've created a world where they've supposedly, allegedly gotten rid of the major social problems, the major social ills, whatever they considered those to be. That is one aspect. Another aspect is the government, of course, or whoever is in charge of this society, is totalitarian, as in all-pervasive, a very authoritarian society, and that they are very pervasive, that they are able to know a lot, that they are not necessarily omnipresent, but they are able to be just about anywhere and see just about anything. So their knowledge and their power are very, very hard to undermine or overthrow. So we have an omnipotent or almost omnipotent state with a supposedly perfect system. And third aspect, the population willingly supports that system, whether they've been brainwashed or conditioned to do so, or they just went along with it for the sake of peace. Whatever it happens to be, the majority of the population does not fight against the system, not even in a covert way. Everybody goes along with it. For the most part, most people think that it is the right type of system, and living this way is the right way to live. And one other aspect of a dystopian novel, typically, is a single character, maybe a small group of characters, who challenge, question, or reject that system. So in 1984, this is Winston Smith. In Brave New World, this is John the Savage and everyone he meets with. In We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, which kind of kicked off the whole thing, it's the creator of The Integral and the rebels that he meets. In The Giver, it is the receiver, Jonah. In The Handmaid's Tale, it is Offred, our viewpoint protagonist. But there's another way to tell a dystopian story. And I discovered that way by reading Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I just finished this novel a couple weeks ago, finally read it after a colleague of mine recommended it to me a decade ago. The previous Ishiguro novel that I'd read is The Buried Giant, which is his take on Arthurian fantasy. This is his take on sci-fi dystopia. And Ishiguro is a literary author, a British literary author. And so most of his novels take place in Britain, dealing with British people, dealing with very British problems. Here, he's creating an alternative history for us. His novel came out in 2006. The action in it takes place in the 90s. But it's a world that's very different from the world that we know. It's a world that went in a different direction after World War II. Now, he never says exactly who won World War II in this world, how things came to be this way, but they've created a utopia. We don't really see that utopia through most of the book. So there's going to be some spoilers here. I'm trying not to spoil the major plot points, but I am going to spoil the world for you. Now, a lot of this gets revealed pretty early on, but some of it takes a while, takes throughout the whole book to unravel, to realize what the world is going to be and why it's set up this way. So if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, just go ahead and read the book. I got all of this, plus all of the major plot points, spoiled for me well ahead of time. I already knew pretty much most of the major stuff in the book prior to reading it. I still enjoyed the book quite a bit. Actually, spoiling it didn't really spoil the book for me at all. So it's not that kind of book where you need to be surprised. But if you really don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and read it first. I will give you some information about the world right here, so you've been warned. The main characters, Kathy, who is our first-person point of view narrator, Ruth and Tommy, who are her childhood friends. The story, through Kathy's memories, follows most of their lives, what they do, from their young days at boarding school together, where they all grew up. They all grew up without parents, raised in the same boarding school by the same guardians. There are other people like them throughout the country, throughout England, in this society, who were raised in much less privileged conditions than this boarding school. Apparently, this boarding school was the best that they could have possibly been raised in. They find out before they graduate the boarding school, so another spoiler, it's about a third of the way into the book, that the reason that they are raised the way they are, and the reason that they have been told and been trained over and over again to keep themselves healthy, is that they are not going to grow up to have jobs and families and other things that the other people that they read about or see on TV are going to go through. They are not going to have futures like that.
Students of Hailsham are special.
Yes,
their futures are already set in stone. They were born, created to be organ donors. They're all clones. So the utopian aspect of this society is that from the view of normal people, people with mommies and daddies, the most of society, they have eliminated disease. Not eliminated death, not all disease, but serious, life-threatening diseases like cancer, heart failure, liver failure, kidney disease, all of those can be eradicated now because they have fresh, healthy organ donors to replace all those organs. What Ishiguro does brilliantly here is he doesn't give us somebody who's a recipient of the benefit of that system and then show him or her the problem of that system and then have that person realize that they need to rebel, aka Winston Smith, who's a member of the Inner Party, or Bernard in Brave New World, who's one of the Alpha class, or the creator of the Integral, who's one of the top people in his society. Instead, we're given the clone's perspective. We're given perspective on the flip side of the utopia. It's never utopian for them. They are always living under a very short timeline. They know that they have an expiration date. They start donating in their early adulthood, and most of them, Kathy's telling us this story when she's 32. By that time, Ruth and Tommy are already dead. Not much of a spoiler, you find that out in the very first chapter, but they've already done their donations. They've already completed. They don't say dead, they say completed. If there's not a more dystopian word, I don't know. But anyway, the book doesn't focus on that. The book doesn't focus on the injustice of their struggle. It doesn't focus on how to overthrow the system or the problems of a system like this and how it might be overthrown, like a lot of dystopias do. It doesn't give us that character who's rebelling. Nobody rebels in here. Nobody questions the system, really. They chafe against the injustice of it, but they don't even use the word injustice. No one really steps up and challenges and tries to overthrow the whole thing. What Ishiguro is trying to go with here is, in most dystopian societies, that's the way it is. Winston Smith is a very rare rarity in his society. He's giving us the perspective of the characters who aren't Winston Smith, the characters who aren't Bernard, who aren't John the Savage. What about the people who just go along, who just are trying to live their day-to-day lives? And these people in particular, who are the victims of this society. They're the ones who are victimized so that everyone else can live better. If you've read The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Le Guin, these clones are the equivalent of that child in the basement. Even though they're generally treated more humanely than that, still, that's what they're going through. The utopia is only possible because of the injustice imposed upon these clones. It makes it a more human story. And yet, through reading it, while we can get the human connections, how even if you have a limited timeline, even if you're living in an unjust society, there's still As a person, you have personal goals, personal drives, personal desires, and relationships that are important and that matter to you and to the people that you're in relationship with. That's what he's exploring here, which means that this can go well beyond the dystopian environment that he's given. Anyone who's living with a shortened timeline, whether it's a very old person or somebody who's been diagnosed with a fatal disease, you're living on a borrowed timeline. You don't know when things are going to end, but it's going to be short. And yet you still have goals, you still have dreams, still have desires, still have relationships that you want to cultivate. Everyone still has their humanity to hold on to no matter the situation. He's exploring that in a lot more detail. That's much more his focus than the horrificness of the society. And yet, through reading it, I was enraged for the characters. I was deeply driven and motivated to rebel on their behalf because I was just chafing against the injustice of their plight. It's very easy to sympathize with them and to rail against the injustice of the society, even though there's nothing that they could do about it, nothing that we can do about it. But it seems like there's something that someone should have done about it. Well, I think this is just a great way to go about dystopia because it's so thought-provoking. It's not just about the society, but it's about the people. You can use a dystopian society or a dystopian background to tell any kind of story. You don't have to tell the story of the one rebel rebelling against the society so that your entire focus is on a critique of the society. That societal critique can be in the background of the human story that you put in the foreground, just like Ishiguro does. It's just one example of how to twist a genre and take it in a new direction. Just because you're trying to write within a genre does not mean you are bound by every convention of that genre. You can do so many things with it. You can tell your story, but also impart other things within it that can connect to other stories and other ideas and other traditions. I hope this helped you guys. I find this story really inspiring just because it gave me a new way to think about writing a dystopia of my own, possibly. Whether or not I write a dystopia or something else, this certainly gives me different ways to think about genre fiction and approaching genre fiction from a different lens. So I hope that helps you as well. Please leave your comments below. What do you think about Never Let Me Go or Ishiguro in general? What do you think about dystopian fiction? Have you ever tried to write it? What do you think about how to portray it? Leave your comments below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please consider becoming a member. If you want more instructional content, you want videos early, stuff like that, it's cheap, and it would really help me out. I appreciate all of my current members, so thank you so much. Click the join button down there below if you want to know more. And until next time, good luck and good writing. Peace.